rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, Eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a place to stand, and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. Eureka, I have found it, on discovery of a method to test the purity of gold. Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. There are things which seem incredible to most men who have not studied mathematics. Mathematics reveals its secrets only to those who approach it with pure love, for its own beauty. How many theorems in geometry which have seemed at first impracticable are in time successfully worked out? The center of gravity of any parallelogram lies on the straight line, joining the middle points of opposite sides. Two magnitudes, whether commensurable or incommensurable, balance at distances reciprocally proportional to the magnitudes. The diameter of the earth is greater than the diameter of the moon, and the diameter of the sun is greater than the diameter of the earth. Those who claim to discover everything, but produce no proofs of the same, may be confuted, as having actually pretended to discover the impossible. Any solid lighter than a fluid will, if placed in the fluid, be so far immersed that the weight of the solid will be equal to the weight of the fluid displaced. Equal weights at equal distances are in equilibrium, and equal weights at unequal distances are not in equilibrium, but incline towards the weight which is at the greater distance. It follows at once from the last proposition that the center of gravity of any triangle is at the intersection of the lines drawn from any two angles to the middle points of the opposite. Supposed to have been his cry, jumping naked from his bath and running in the streets, excited by a discovery about water displacement to solve a problem about the purity of a gold crown. Having been the discoverer of many splendid things, he is said to have asked his friends and relations that, after his death, they should place on his tomb a cylinder enclosing a sphere, writing on it the proportion of the containing solid to that which is contained. I am persuaded that this method for calculating the volume of a sphere will be of no little service to mathematics, for I foresee that once it is understood and established, it will be used to discover other theorems which have not yet occurred to me by other mathematicians, now living or yet unborn. Many people believe that the grains of sand are infinite in multitude. Others think that, although their number is not without limit, no number can ever be named which will be greater than the number of grains of sand. But I shall try to prove to you that among the numbers which I have named there are those which exceed the number of grains in a heap of sand, the size not only of the earth, but even of the universe. Archimedes to Eratosthenes' greeting. Certain things first became clear to me by a mechanical method, although they had to be demonstrated by geometry afterwards, because their investigation by the said method did not furnish an actual demonstration. But it is of course easier, when we have previously acquired by the method some knowledge of the questions, to supply the proof than it is to find it without any previous knowledge. Spoken of the young Archimedes. He was as much enchanted by the rudiments of algebra as he would have been if I had given him an engine worked by steam, with a methylated spirit lamp to heat the boiler. More enchanted, perhaps, for the engine would have got broken, and remaining always itself, would in any case have lost its charm, while the rudiments of algebra continued to grow and blossom in his mind with an unfailing luxuriance. Every day he made the discovery of something which seemed to him exquisitely beautiful. The new toy was inexhaustible in its potentialities. Rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, Eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a place to stand, and a lever long enough and I will move the world. Eureka, I have found it. On discovery of a method to test the purity of gold. Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. There are things which seem incredible to most men who have not studied mathematics. Mathematics reveals its secrets only to those who approach it with pure love, for its own beauty. It is commonly believed that anyone who tabulates numbers is a statistician. This is like believing that anyone who owns a scalpel is a surgeon. By the help of microscopes, there is nothing so small as to escape our inquiry. Hence there is a new visible world discovered to the understanding. Nature is, as it were, a continual circulation. Water is raised in vapor into the air by one quality and precipitated down in drops by another. The rivers run into the sea, and the sea again supplies them. The footsteps of nature are to be tracked, not only in her ordinary course, but when she seems to be put to her shifts, to make many doublings and turnings, and to use some kind of art in endeavoring to avoid our discovery. The truth is, the science of nature has been already too long made only a work of the brain and the fancy. It is now high time that it should return to the plainness and soundness of observations on material and obvious things. The business and design of the Royal Society is to improve the knowledge of natural things and all useful arts, manufactures, mechanic practices, engines and inventions by experiments, not meddling with divinity, metaphysics, morals, politics, grammar, rhetoric, or logic. There is scarce any one invention which this nation has produced in our age, but it has some way or other been set forward by his assistants. He is indeed a man born for the good of mankind, and for the honor of his country. So I may thank God that Dr. Wilkins was an Englishman, for wherever he had lived, there had been the chief seat of generous knowledge and true philosophy. Most of these mountains and inland places whereon these kind of petrified bodies and shells are found at present, or have been heretofore, were formerly under the water, and that either by the descending of the waters to another part of the earth by the alteration of the center of gravity of the whole bulk, or rather by the eruption of some kind of subterraneous fires or earthquakes, great quantities of earth have been deserted by the water and laid bare and dry. For the members of the assembly having before their eyes so many fatal instances of the errors and falsehoods, in which the greatest part of mankind has so long wandered, because they relied upon the strength of humane reason alone, have begun anew to correct all hypotheses by sense, as seamen do their dead reckonings by celestial observations. And to this purpose, it has been their principal endeavor to enlarge and strengthen the senses by medicine, and by such outward instruments as are proper for their particular works. If the finding of coins, medals, urns, and other monuments of famous persons, or towns, or utensils, be admitted for unquestionable proofs that such persons or things have in former times had a being, certainly those petrifactions may be allowed to be of equal validity and evidence that there have been formerly such vegetables or animals. These are truly authentic antiquity, not to be counterfeited, the stamps and impressions and characters of nature that are beyond the reach and power of humane wit and invention, and are true universal characters legible to all rational men. Rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, Eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a place to stand, and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. Eureka, I have found it. On discovery of a method to test the purity of gold. Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. There are things which seem incredible to most men who have not studied mathematics. Mathematics reveals its secrets only to those who approach it with pure love, for its own beauty. How many theorems in geometry which have seemed at first impracticable are in time successfully worked out? The center of gravity of any parallelogram lies. There is nothing without a reason. The present is big with the future. He who does not act does not exist. This is the best of all possible worlds. Why is there something rather than nothing? Every feeling is the perception of a truth. Nothing is necessitated whose opposite is possible. He who hasn't tasted bitter things hasn't earned sweet things. Music is a calculation which the soul makes unconsciously in secret. As far as we are capable of knowledge, we sin in neglecting to acquire it. Music is the hidden arithmetical exercise of a mind unconscious that it is calculating. Nothing is in the intellect that was not first in the senses, except the intellect itself. For all bodies are in perpetual flux like rivers, and parts are passing in and out of them continually. If you could blow the brain up to the size of a mill and walk about inside, you would not find consciousness. Imaginary numbers are a fine and wonderful resource of the divine intellect, almost an amphibian between being and non-being. For I hold that it is only when we can prove everything we assert that we understand perfectly the thing under consideration. Perceptions which are at present insensible may grow some day. Nothing is useless, and eternity provides great scope for change. There is nothing in the understanding which has not come from the senses, except the understanding itself, or the one who understands. The means of obtaining as much variety as possible, but with the greatest possible order, is the means of obtaining as much perfection as possible. It is unworthy of excellent men to lose hours like slaves in the labor of calculation, which could safely be relegated to anyone else if machines were used. I have so many ideas that may perhaps be of some use in time, if others more penetrating than I go deeply into them some day, and join the beauty of their minds to the labor of mine. It is the knowledge of necessary and eternal truths that distinguishes us from the mere animals and gives us reason and the sciences, raising us to the knowledge of ourselves and of God. If geometry were as much opposed to our passions and present interests as is ethics, we should contest it and violate I but little less, notwithstanding all the demonstrations of Euclid and Archimedes. The mind is not only capable of knowing innate ideas, but further of finding them in itself, and if it had only the simple capacity to receive knowledge, it would not be the source of necessary truths. The mind leans on innate principles every moment, but it does not come so easily to distinguish them and to represent them distinctly and separately, because that demands great attention to its acts, and the majority of people, little accustomed to think, has little of it. This interconnection or accommodation of all created things to each other, and each to all the others, brings it about that each simple substance has relations that express all the others, and consequently, that each simple substance is a perpetual, living mirror of the universe. Nature has established patterns originating in the return of events, but only for the most part. New illnesses flood the human race, so that no matter how many experiments you have done on corpses, you have not thereby imposed a limit on the nature of events, so that in the future they could not vary. It is true that the more we see some connection in what happens to us, the more we are confirmed in the opinion we have about the reality of our appearances. And it is also true that the more we examine our appearances closely, the more we find them well sequenced, as microscopes and other aids in making experiments have shown us. And just as the same town, when looked at from different sides, appears quite different and is, as it were, multiplied in perspective, so also it happens that because of the infinite number of simple substances, it is as if there were as many different universes, which are however but different perspective representations of a single universe, form the different point of view of each monad. Rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a place to stand, and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. Eureka, I have found it, on discovery of a method to test the purity of gold. Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. There are things which seem incredible to most men who have not studied mathematics. Mathematics reveals its secrets only to those who approach it with pure love, for its own beauty. How many theorems in geometry which have seen morality is a private and costly luxury. All experience is an arch to build upon. They know enough who know how to learn. Practical politics consists in ignoring facts. Politics is simply the organization of hatreds. Chaos was the law of nature. Order was the dream of man. There is no such thing as an underestimate of average intelligence. During an election campaign, the air is full of speeches and vice versa. A teacher affects eternity. He can never tell where his influence stops. Every man should have a fair-sized cemetery in which to bury the faults of his friends. A congressman is a pig. The only way to get his snout from the trough is to rap it sharply with a stick. Politics, as a practice, whatever its professions, has always been the systematic organization of hatreds. No man means all he says, and yet very few say all they mean, for words are slippery and thought is viscous. You can't use tact with a congressman. A congressman is a hog. You must take a stick and hit him on the snout. Someday science may have the existence of mankind in its power, and the human race commit suicide by blowing up the world. Of all studies, the one he would rather have avoided was that of his own mind. He knew no tragedy so heartrending as introspection. All taxation is an evil, but heavy taxes, indiscriminately levied on everything, are one of the greatest curses that can afflict a people. The Indian summer of life should be a little sunny and a little sad, like the season, and infinite in wealth and depth of tone, but never hustled. One friend in a lifetime is much, 2 are many, 3 are hardly possible. Friendship needs a certain parallelism of life, a community of thought, a rivalry of aim. The press is the hired agent of a moneyed system, and set up for no other purpose than to tell lies where their interests are involved. One can trust nobody and nothing. A parent gives life, but as parent gives no more. A murderer takes life, but his deed stops there. A teacher affects eternity. He can never tell where his influence stops. The whole fabric of society will go to rack if we really lay hands of reform on our rotten institutions. From top to bottom, the whole system is a fraud. All of us know it, laborers and capitalists alike, and all of us are consenting parties to it. I firmly believe that before many centuries more, science will be the master of man. The engines he will have invented will be beyond his strength to control. Someday, science shall have the existence of mankind in its power, and the human race commit suicide by blowing up the world. Modern politics is, at bottom, a struggle not of men but of forces. The men become every year more and more creatures of force, massed about central powerhouses. The conflict is no longer between the men, but between the motors that drive the men, and the men tend to succumb to their own motive forces. Rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, Eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a place to stand, and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. Eureka, I have found it, on discovery of a method to test the purity of gold. Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. There are things which seem incredible to most men who have not studied mathematics. Mathematics reveals its secrets only to those who approach it with pure love, for its own beauty. How many theorems in geometry which have seemed at first impracticable are in time successfully worked out? The center of gravity of any parallelogram lies on the straight line, joining the middle points of opposite sides. The smallest quantity of alcohol scares away novel ideas. Music stands in a much closer connection with pure sensation than any of the other arts. Reason, we call that faculty innate in us of discovering laws and applying them with thought. A metaphysical conclusion is either a false conclusion or a concealed experimental conclusion. A moving body whose motion was not retarded by any resisting force would continue to move to all eternity. Music strikes the ear as a perfectly undisturbed uniform sound, which remains unaltered as long as it exists. All that science can achieve is a perfect knowledge and a perfect understanding of the action of natural and moral forces. Whoever, in the pursuit of science, seeks after immediate practical utility may generally rest assured that he will seek in vain. The quantity of force which can be brought into action in the whole of nature is unchangeable, and can neither be increased nor diminished. Each individual fact, taken by itself, can indeed arouse our curiosity or our astonishment, or be useful to us in its practical applications. What we see is the solution to a computational problem. Our brains compute the most likely causes from the photon absorptions within our eyes. Black is real sensation, even if it is produced by entire absence of light. The sensation of black is distinctly different from the lack of all sensations. The originator of a new concept finds, as a rule, that it is much more difficult to find out why other people do not understand him than it was to discover the new truth. I think the facts leave no doubt that the very mightiest among the chemical forces are of electric origin. The atoms cling to their electric charges, and opposite electric charges cling to each other. A raised weight can produce work, but in doing so it must necessarily sink from its height, and when it has fallen as deep as it can fall, its gravity remains as before, but it can no longer do work. There is a kind, I might almost say, of artistic satisfaction when we are able to survey the enormous wealth of nature as a regularly ordered whole, a cosmos, an image of the logical thought of our own mind. Windmills, which are used in the great plains of Holland and North Germany to supply the want of falling water, afford another instance of the action of velocity. The sails are driven by air in motion, by wind. Not that I wish by any means to deny that the mental life of individuals and peoples is also in conformity with law, as is the object of philosophical, philological, historical, moral, and social sciences to establish. Just as a physicist has to examine the telescope and galvanometer with which he is working, has to get a clear conception of what he can attain with them, and how they may deceive him, so, too, it seemed to me necessary to investigate likewise the capabilities of our power of thought. The most startling result of Faraday's law is perhaps this. If we accept the hypothesis that the elementary substances are composed of atoms, we cannot avoid concluding that electricity also, positive as well as negative, is divided into definite elementary portions, which behave like atoms of electricity. Isolated facts and experiments have in themselves no value, however great their number may be. They only become valuable in a theoretical or practical point of view when they make us acquainted with the law of a series of uniformly recurring phenomena, or, it may be, only give a negative result showing an incompleteness in our knowledge of such a law, till then held to be perfect. During the first half of the present century, we had an Alexander von Humboldt, who was able to scan the scientific knowledge of his time in its details, and to bring it within one vast generalization. At the present juncture, it is obviously very doubtful whether this task could be accomplished in a similar way, even by a mind with gifts so peculiarly suited for the purpose as Humboldt's was, and if all his time and work were devoted to the purpose. The total quantity of all the forces capable of work in the whole universe remains eternal and unchanged throughout all their changes. All change in nature amounts to this, that force can change its form and locality, without its quantity being changed. The universe possesses, once for all, a store of force which is not altered by any change of phenomena, can neither be increased nor diminished, and which maintains any change which takes place on it. Rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, Eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a place to stand, and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. Eureka, I have found it, on discovery of a method to test the purity of gold. Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. There are things which seem incredible to most men who have not studied mathematics. Mathematics reveals its secrets only to those who approach it with pure love, for its own beauty. How many theorems in geometry which have seemed at first impracticable are in time successfully worked out. The center of gravity of any parallelogram lies on the straight line. I therefore take the liberty of proposing for this hypothetical new atom, which is not light but plays an essential part in every process of radiation, the name photon. It was not easy for a person brought up in the ways of classical thermodynamics to come around to the idea that gain of entropy eventually is nothing more nor less than loss of information. There is always the danger in scientific work that some word or phrase will be used by different authors to express so many ideas and surmises that, unless redefined, it loses all real significance. We frequently define an acid or a base as a substance whose aqueous solution gives, respectively, a higher concentration of hydrogen ion or of hydroxide ion than that furnished by pure water. This is a very one-sided definition. Since hydrogen is a constituent of most of our electrolytic solvents, the definition of an acid or base as a substance which gives up or takes up hydrogen ion would be more general than the one we used before, but it would not be universal. We may say that a basic substance is one which has a lone pair of electrons which may be used to complete the stable group of another atom, and that an acid is one which can employ a lone pair from another molecule in completing the stable group of one of its own atoms. A detective with his murder mystery, a chemist seeking the structure of a new compound, use little of the formal and logical modes of reasoning. Through a series of intuitions, surmises, fancies, they stumble upon the right explanation, and have a knack of seizing it when it once comes within reach. I take it that a monograph of this sort belongs to the ephemera literature of science. The studied care which is warranted in the treatment of the more slowly moving branches of science would be out of place here. Rather, with the pen of a journalist, we must attempt to record a momentary phase of current thought, which may at any instant change with kaleidoscopic abruptness. The scientist is a practical man, and his are practical, i.e., practically attainable aims. He does not seek the ultimate but the proximate. He does not speak of the last analysis but rather of the next approximation. His are not those beautiful structures so delicately designed that a single flaw may cause the collapse of the whole. The scientist builds slowly and with a gross but solid kind of masonry. If dissatisfied with any of his work, even if it be near the very foundations, he can replace that part without damage to the remainder. Rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, Eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a place to stand, and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. Eureka, I have found it. On discovery of a method to test the purity of gold. Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. There are things which seem incredible to most men who have not studied mathematics. Mathematics reveals its secrets only to those who approach it with pure love, for its own beauty. How many theorems in geometry which have seemed at first impracticable are in computers are like humans, they do everything except think. You don't have to be responsible for the world that you're in. Truth is much too complicated to allow anything but approximations. All stable processes we shall predict, all unstable processes we shall control. Young man, in mathematics you don't understand things, you just get used to them. There's no sense in being precise when you don't even know what you're talking about. There is no point in being precise if you do not even know what you are talking about. With 4 parameters I can fit an elephant, and with 5 I can make him wiggle his trunk. There probably is a God. Many things are easier to explain if there is than if there isn't. I am thinking about something much more important than bombs. I am thinking about computers. Problems are often stated in vague terms, because it is quite uncertain what the problems really are. Anyone who attempts to generate random numbers by deterministic means is, of course, living in a state of sin. I would like to make a confession which may seem immoral. I do not believe absolutely in Hilbert space anymore. If you tell me precisely what it is a machine cannot do, then I can always make a machine which will do just that. If people do not believe that mathematics is simple, it is only because they do not realize how complicated life is. When we talk mathematics, we may be discussing a secondary language built on the primary language of the nervous system. Technological possibilities are irresistible to man. If man can go to the moon, he will. If he can control the climate, he will. If one has really technically penetrated a subject, things that previously seemed in complete contrast might be purely mathematical transformations of each other. You insist that there is something a machine cannot do. If you tell me precisely what it is a machine cannot do, then I can always make a machine which will do just that. It is just as foolish to complain that people are selfish and treacherous as it is to complain that the magnetic field does not increase unless the electric field has a curl. Both are laws of nature. Science as well as technology will in the near and in the farther future increasingly turn from problems of intensity, substance, and energy to problems of structure, organization, information, and control. The total subject of mathematics is clearly too broad for any of us. I do not think that any mathematician since Gauss has covered it uniformly and fully. Even Hilbert did not, and all of us are of considerably lesser width, quite apart from the question of depth, than Hilbert. The calculus was the first achievement of modern mathematics, and it is difficult to overestimate its importance. I think it defines more unequivocally than anything else the inception of modern mathematics, and the system of mathematical analysis, which is its logical development, still constitutes the greatest technical advance in exact thinking. John von Neumann's remarks as keynote speaker at the first national meeting of the Association for Computing Machinery, 1947, as quoted in. By and large, it is uniformly true in mathematics that there is a time lapse between a mathematical discovery and the moment when it is useful, and that this lapse of time can be anything from 30 to 100 years, in some cases even more, and that the whole system seems to function without any direction, without any reference to usefulness, and without any desire to do things which are useful. The sciences do not try to explain, they hardly even try to interpret, they mainly make models. By a model is meant a mathematical construct which, with the addition of certain verbal interpretations, describes observed phenomena. The justification of such a mathematical construct is solely and precisely that it is expected to work. That is, correctly to describe phenomena from a reasonably wide area. Rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, Eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a place to stand, and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. Eureka, I have found it, on discovery of a method to test the purity of gold. Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. There are things which seem incredible to most men who have not studied mathematics. Mathematics reveals its secrets only to those who approach it with pure love, for its own beauty. How many theorems in geometry which have seemed at first impracticable are in time successfully worked out? The center of gravity of any parallelogram lies on the straight line, joining the middle points of opposite sides. Nature never jests. The ovary of an ancestress will contain not only her daughter, but also her granddaughter, her great-granddaughter, and her great-great-granddaughter. And if it is once proved that an ovary can contain many generations, there is no absurdity in saying that it contains them all. I call that part of the human body irritable, which becomes shorter upon being touched, very irritable if it contracts upon a slight touch, and the contrary if by a violent touch it contracts but little. I call that a sensible part of the human body, which upon being touched transmits the impression of it to the soul. And in brutes, in whom the existence of a soul is not so clear, I call those parts sensible, the irritation of which occasions evident signs of pain and disquiet in the animal. On the contrary, I call that insensible, which being burnt, tore, pricked, or cut till it is quite destroyed, occasions no sign of pain nor convulsion, nor any sort of change in the situation of the body. The result of all these experiments has given place to a new division of the parts of the human body, which I shall follow in this short essay, by distinguishing those which are susceptible of irritability and sensibility from those which are not. But the theory, why some parts of the human body are endowed with these properties, while others are not, I shall not at all meddle with. For I am persuaded that the source of both lies concealed beyond the reach of the knife and microscope, beyond which I do not choose to hazard many conjectures, as I have no desire of teaching what I am ignorant of myself. For the vanity of attempting to guide others in paths where we find ourselves in the dark shows, in my humble opinion, the last degree of arrogance and ignorance. Rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, Eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a place to stand, and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. Eureka, I have found it, on discovery of a method to test the purity of gold. Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. There are things which seem incredible to most men who have not studied mathematics. Mathematics reveals its secrets only to those who approach it with pure love, for its own beauty. Dare to think for yourself. Love truth but pardon error. Common sense is not so common. Faith consists in believing what reason cannot. The secret of being a bore is to tell everything. Every man is guilty of all the good he did not do. I don't know where I am going, but I am on my way. Ice cream is exquisite. What a pity it isn't illegal. Judge a man by his questions rather than by his answers. Now, my good man, this is no time to be making enemies. The most important decision you make is to be in a good mood. Cherish those who seek the truth, but beware of those who find it. God is a comedian playing to an audience that is too afraid to laugh. God is a circle whose center is everywhere and circumference nowhere. Life is a shipwreck, but we must not forget to sing in the lifeboats. Think for yourself, and let others enjoy the privilege of doing so too. Doubt is an uncomfortable condition, but certainty is a ridiculous one. Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. It is better to risk saving a guilty person than to condemn an innocent one. The more I read, the more I acquire, the more certain I am that I know nothing. It is dangerous to be right in matters on which the established authorities are wrong. Let us read and let us dance. These two amusements will never do any harm to the world. Appreciation is a wonderful thing. It makes what is excellent in others belong to us as well. I have never made but one prayer to God, a very short one. O Lord, make my enemies ridiculous, and God granted it. Every man is a creature of the age in which he lives, and few are able to raise themselves above the ideas of the time. It is forbidden to kill. Therefore all murderers are punished unless they kill in large numbers and to the sound of trumpets. Our wretched species is so made that those who walk on the well-trodden path always throw stones at those who are showing a new road. Fools have a habit of believing that everything written by a famous author is admirable. For my part, I read only to please myself and like only what suits my taste. Despite the enormous quantity of books, how few people read. And if one reads profitably, one would realize how much stupid stuff the vulgar herd is content to swallow every day. I have wanted to kill myself 100 times, but somehow I am still in love with life. This ridiculous weakness is perhaps one of our more stupid melancholy propensities. For is there anything more stupid than to be eager to go on carrying a burden which one would gladly throw away, to loathe one's very being and yet to hold it fast, to fondle the snake that devours us until it has eaten our hearts away? Rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, Eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a place to stand, and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. Eureka, I have found it, on discovery of a method to test the purity of gold. Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. There are things which seem incredible to most men who have not studied mathematics. Mathematics reveals its secrets only to those who approach it with pure love, for its own beauty. How many theorems in geometry which, of all things, I like books best. What one man calls God, another calls the laws of physics. You may live to see man-made horrors beyond your comprehension. The present is theirs, the future for which I really worked is mine. One must be sane to think clearly, but one can think deeply and be quite insane. Be alone, that is the secret of invention. Be alone, that is when ideas are born. If your hate could be turned into electricity, it would light up the whole world. The individual is ephemeral. Races and nations come and pass away, but man remains. I don't care that they stole my idea. I care that they don't have any of their own. I do not think you can name many great inventions that have been made by married men. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Life is and will ever remain an equation incapable of solution, but it contains certain known factors. Our virtues and our failings are inseparable like force and matter. When they separate, man is no more. We crave for new sensations, but soon become indifferent to them. The wonders of yesterday are today common occurrences. The scientists of today think deeply instead of clearly. One must be sane to think clearly, but one can think deeply and be quite insane. The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence. All that was great in the past was ridiculed, condemned, combated, suppressed, only to emerge all the more powerfully, all the more triumphantly from the struggle. Let the future tell the truth, and evaluate each one according to his work and accomplishments. The present is theirs, the future for which I have really worked is mine. Today's scientists have substituted mathematics for experiments, and they wander off through equation after equation, and eventually build a structure which has no relation to reality. Invention is the most important product of man's creative brain. The ultimate purpose is the complete mastery of mind over the material world, the harnessing of human nature to human needs. My brain is only a receiver. In the universe there is a core from which we obtain knowledge, strength, and inspiration. I have not penetrated into the secrets of this core, but I know that it exists. The gift of mental power comes from God, divine being, and if we concentrate our minds on that truth, we become in tune with this great power. My mother had taught me to seek all truth in the Bible. I do not think there is any thrill that can go through the human heart like that felt by the inventor as he sees some creation of the brain unfolding to success. Such emotions make a man forget food, sleep, friends, love, everything. I am credited with being one of the hardest workers, and perhaps I am, if thought is the equivalent of labor, for I have devoted to it almost all of my waking hours. But if work is interpreted to be a definite performance in a specified time according to a rigid rule, then I may be the worst of idlers. What we now want is closer contact and better understanding between individuals and communities all over the earth, and the elimination of egoism and pride which is always prone to plunge the world into primeval barbarism and strife. Peace can only come as a natural consequence of universal enlightenment. Fights between individuals, as well as governments and nations, invariably result from misunderstandings in the broadest interpretation of this term. Misunderstandings are always caused by the inability of appreciating one another's point of view. This again is due to the ignorance of those concerned, not so much in their own, as in their mutual fields. The peril of a clash is aggravated by a more or less predominant sense of combativeness, posed by every human being. To resist this inherent fighting tendency, the best way is to dispel ignorance of the doings of others by a systematic spread of general knowledge. With this object in view, it is most important to aid exchange of thought and intercourse. Rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm. Brisk talkers are generally slow thinkers. Vision is the art of seeing things invisible. War, that mad game the world so loves to play. In men desire begets love, and in women love begets desire. Every man desires to live long, but no man wishes to be old. Everybody wants to live forever, but nobody wants to grow old. Live every day as your last, because one of these days it will be. You cannot reason a person out of something they were not reasoned into. Politics, as the word is commonly understood, are nothing but corruptions. I never wonder to see men wicked, but I often wonder to see them not ashamed. Power is no blessing in itself, except when it is used to protect the innocent. There is no vice which mankind carries to such wild extremes as that of avarice. We have enough religion to make us hate, but not enough to make us love one another. There are few wild beasts more to be dreaded than a talking man having nothing to say. Laws are like cobwebs which may catch small flies, but let wasps and hornets break through. Some men, under the notion of weeding out prejudice, eradicate virtue, honesty, and religion. Every day is an opportunity to make a new happy ending. May you live all the days of your life. Satire is a sort of glass, wherein beholders do generally discover everybody's face but their own. How is it possible to expect that mankind will take advice when they will not so much as take warning? The ruin of a state is generally preceded by an universal degeneracy of manners and contempt of religion. You should never be ashamed to admit you have been wrong. It only proves you are wiser today than yesterday. When a true genius appears, you can know him by this sign, that all the dunces are in a confederacy against him. Falsehood flies and truth comes limping after it, so that when men come to be undeceived, it is too late. The jest is over, and the tale hath had its effect. I have ever hated all nations, professions, and communities, and all my love is toward individuals. For instance, I hate the tribe of lawyers, but I love. So with physicians, I will not speak of my own trade, soldiers, English, Scotch, French, and the rest. But principally I hate and detest that animal called man, although I heartily love John, Peter, Thomas, and so forth. This is the system upon which I have governed myself many years, but do not tell. Rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, Eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a place to stand, and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. Eureka, I have found it, on discovery of a method to test the purity of gold. Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. There are things which seem incredible to most men who have not studied mathematics. Mathematics reveals its secrets only to those who approach it with pure love, for its own beauty. How many theorems in geometry which have seemed at first impracticable are in time successfully worked out? The center of gravity of any parallelogram lies on the straight line, joining the middle points of opposite sides. Two magnitudes, whether commensurate, when it is useful to them, men can believe a theory of which they know nothing more than its name. The party that called itself liberal aimed at respecting the liberty to dispose of one's own goods. The assertion that men are objectively equal is so absurd that it does not even merit being refuted. My wish is to construct a system of sociology on the model of celestial mechanics, physics, and chemistry. For a very long time, and among a large number of peoples, political power has belonged to the owners of the land. Empirical laws have only slight or even no value beyond the limits within which they have been observed to be true. Give me a fruitful error any time, full of seeds, bursting with its own corrections. You can keep your sterile truth for yourself. The intent of sincere humanitarians is to do good to society, just as the intent of the child who kills a bird by too much fondling is to do good to the bird. In any series of elements to be controlled, a selected small fraction, in terms of numbers of elements, always accounts for a large fraction in terms of effect. Among civilized peoples, especially the very wealthy population of the United States of America, women have become objects of luxury who consume but do not produce. It is a known fact that almost all revolutions have been the work, not of the common people, but of the aristocracy, and especially of the decayed part of the aristocracy. Society is not homogeneous, and those who do not deliberately close their eyes have to recognize that men differ greatly from one another from the physical, moral, and intellectual viewpoints. Theories of natural law and the law of nations are another excellent example of discussions destitute of all exactness. Natural law is simply that law of which the person using the phrase approves. All governments use force, and all assert that they are founded on reason. In fact, whether universal suffrage prevails or not, it is always an oligarchy that governs, finding ways to give to the will of the people the expression which the few desire. Above, far above the prejudices and passions of men soar the laws of nature. Eternal and immutable, they are the expression of the creative power. They represent what is, what must be, what otherwise could not be. Man can come to understand that he is incapable of changing them. The diverse natures of men, combined with the necessity to satisfy in some manner the sentiment which desires them to be equal, has had the result that in the democracies they have endeavored to provide the appearance of power in the people, and the reality of power in an elite. The liberals who demanded equality of taxation on behalf of the poor, for instance, did not imagine that they would obtain progressive taxation to the disadvantage of the well-off, and that they would end up with an arrangement in which taxes are voted by those who do not pay them. Increase in the wealth per capita fosters democracy, but the latter, at least according to what we have been able to observe up to now, entails great destruction of wealth and even eventually dries up the sources of it. Hence it is its own grave digger, it destroys what gave it birth. The economic and social theories used by those who take part in the social struggle ought to be judged not by their objective value, but primarily for their effectiveness in arousing emotions. The scientific refutation of them which can be made is useless, however correct it may be objectively. If your Noah and your ark is about to sink, look for the elephants first, because you can throw over a bunch of cats, dogs, squirrels, and everything else that is just a small animal and your ark will keep sinking. But if you can find one elephant to get overboard, you're in much better shape. There are some people who imagine that they can disarm their enemy by complacent flattery. They are wrong. The world has always belonged to the stronger and will belong to them for many years to come. Men only respect those who make themselves respected. Whoever becomes a lamb will find a wolf to eat him. Assume that the new elite were clearly and simply to proclaim its intentions which are to supplant the old elite. No one would come to its assistance. It would be defeated before having fought a battle. On the contrary, it appears to be asking nothing for itself, well knowing that without asking anything in advance it will obtain what it wants as a consequence of its victory. Men follow their sentiments and their self-interest, but it pleases them to imagine that they follow reason, and so they look for, and always find, some theory which, a posteriori, makes their actions appear to be logical. If that theory could be demolished scientifically, the only result would be that another theory would be substituted for the first one, and for the same purpose. Rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a place to stand, and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. Eureka, I have found it, on discovery of a method to test the purity of gold. Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. There are things which seem incredible to most men who have not studied mathematics. Mathematics reveals its secrets only to those who approach it with pure love, for its own beauty. How many theorems in geometry which have seemed at first impracticable are in time successfully worked out. The center of gravity of any parallelogram lies on the straight line. In other words, the Church acknowledges science as the higher authority. The development of a rational view of the nature of catalysis was thus absolutely dependent on the creation of the concept of the rate of chemical reaction. The individual organs follow the same pattern as the whole organism, i.e., they have their period of growth, of stationary, maximum activity, and then of aging decline. Nowadays, however, we recognize that simultaneously with the typical case of a chemical reaction, a typical case of catalytic effect had been studied which constitutes a limiting case. We know from biology that new forms of organisms simulate their primitive form as closely as possible at first, even though obliged to exist under changed internal and external conditions. For with pure water the inversion of cane sugar scarcely proceeds, and subsequently it required very thorough, difficult studies before this effect, and its order of magnitude were established. In specific circumstances, the period of aging decline can set in earlier in a particular organ than in the organism as a whole, which, in a certain general or theoretical sense, is left a cripple or invalid. It has pleased no less than surprised me that, of the many studies whereby I have sought to extend the field of general chemistry, the highest scientific distinction that there is today has been awarded for those on catalysis. The well-known fact that the form of a specific substance, e.g. water, and hence its properties can alter without a change in composition, was disposed of by the formal view that a physical, not a chemical, process was involved. The distinction between the old and the new formulations consisting in the incorporation of the concept of the rate of chemical reactions is so great that it immediately asserted itself in the objective development of catalysis. The worst manifestations of exhaustion were successfully cured by a long period of rest, but it was immediately apparent to me that I had lost once, and for all my former capacity for carrying out experimental work, until physically tired. In the first quarter of the 19th century, the experimental proof for the interdependence of the composition and properties of chemical compounds resulted in the theory that they are mutually related, so that like composition governs like properties, and conversely. Science is one land, having the ability to accommodate even more people as more residents gather in it. It is a treasure that is the greater the more it is shared. Because of that, each of us can do his work in his own way, and the common ground does not mean conformity. My only supporter and comrade in arms was Georg Helm, who had endeavored to formulate an energetic conception of science before me, and had presented his results in a treatise, Die Lehre von der Energie, exhibiting great independence of thought. But we were separated by his aversion to a realistic conception of energy. Consequently, each of us considered the other only a half-ally, toward whom an attitude of caution was necessary. Rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, Eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a empty or forward toward growth. Growth must be chosen again and again. Fear must be overcome again and again. The good or healthy society would then be defined as one that permitted people's highest purposes to emerge by satisfying all their basic needs. The spiritual life is part of the human essence. It is a defining characteristic of human nature, without which human nature is not fully human. Life is an ongoing process of choosing between safety, out of fear and need for defense, and risk, for the sake of progress and growth. Make the growth choice a dozen times a day. Education is learning to grow, learning what to grow toward, learning what is good and bad, learning what is desirable and undesirable, learning what to choose and what not to choose. When people appear to be something other than good and decent, it is only because they are reacting to stress, pain, or the deprivation of basic human needs such as security, love, and self-esteem. A positive self-image and healthy self-esteem is based on approval, acceptance, and recognition from others, but also upon actual accomplishments, achievements, and success, upon the realistic self-confidence which ensues. Self-actualizing people are those who have come to a high level of maturation, health, and self-fulfillment. The values that self-actualizers appreciate include truth, creativity, beauty, goodness, wholeness, aliveness, uniqueness, justice, simplicity, and self-sufficiency. You must want to be first class, meaning the best, the very best you are capable of becoming. If you deliberately plan to be less than you are capable of being, then I warn you that you'll be deeply unhappy for the rest of your life. You will be evading your own capacities, your own possibilities. A musician must make music, an artist must paint, and poet must write, if he is to be ultimately at peace with himself. What a man can be, he must be. This weed we call self-actualization. It refers to man's desire for self-fulfillment, namely to the tendency for him to become actually in what he is potentially, to become everything one is capable of becoming. Let people realize clearly that every time they threaten someone or humiliate or unnecessarily hurt or dominate or reject another human being, they become forces for the creation of psychopathology, even if these be small forces. Let them recognize that every person who is kind, helpful, decent, psychologically democratic, affectionate, and warm is a psychotherapeutic force, even though a small one. A person who makes full use of and exploits his talents, potentialities, and capacities. Such a person seems to be fulfilling himself and doing the best he is capable of doing. The self-actualized person must find in his life those qualities that make his living rich and rewarding. He must find meaningfulness, self-sufficiency, effortlessness, playfulness, richness, simplicity, completion, necessity, perfection, individuality, beauty, and truth. Rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a place to stand, and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. Eureka, I have found it, on discovery of a method to test the purity of gold. Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. There are things which seem incredible to most men who have not studied mathematics. Mathematics reveals its secrets only to those who approach it with pure love, for its own beauty. How many theorems in geometry? Reserve your right to think, for even to think wrongly is better than not to think at all. All formal dogmatic religions are fallacious, and must never be accepted by self-respecting persons as final. He who influences the thinking of his time influences all the moments that follow him. Leave your opinion for eternity. Life is growth, and the more we travel, the more truth we can understand. Understanding the things that surround us is the best preparation to understand the things that lie beyond. To rule by fettering the mind through fear of punishment in another world is just as base as to use force. Reserve your right to think, for even to think wrongly is better than not to think at all. Fables should be taught as fables, myths as myths, and miracles as poetic fancies. To teach superstitions as truths is a most terrible thing. The child mind accepts and believes them, and only through great pain and perhaps tragedy can he be in after years relieved of them. In fact, men will fight for a superstition quite as quickly as for a living truth, often more so, since a superstition is so intangible you cannot get at it to refute it, but truth is a point of view, and so is changeable. Rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, Eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a place to stand, and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. Eureka, I have found it, on discovery of a method to test the purity of gold. Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. There are things which seem incredible to most men who have not studied mathematics. Mathematics reveals its secrets only to those who approach it with pure love, for its own beauty. How many theorems in geometry which have seemed at first impracticable are in time. Reserve your right to think, for even to think wrongly is better than not to think at all. All formal dogmatic religions are fallacious, and must never be accepted by self-respecting persons as final. He who influences the thinking of his time influences all the moments that follow him. Leave your opinion for eternity. Life is growth, and the more we travel, the more truth we can understand. Understanding the things that surround us is the best preparation to understand the things that lie beyond. To rule by fettering the mind through fear of punishment in another world is just as base as to use force. Reserve your right to think, for even to think wrongly is better than not to think at all. Fables should be taught as fables, myths as myths, and miracles as poetic fancies. To teach superstitions as truths is a most terrible thing. The child mind accepts and believes them, and only through great pain and perhaps tragedy can he be in after years relieved of them. In fact, men will fight for a superstition quite as quickly as for a living truth, often more so, since a superstition is so intangible you cannot get at it to refute it, but truth is a point of view, and so is changeable. Rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, Eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a place to stand, and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. Eureka, I have found it, on discovery of a method to test the purity of gold. Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. There are things which seem incredible to most men who have not studied mathematics. Mathematics reveals its secrets only to those who approach it with pure love, for its own beauty. How many theorems in geometry which have seemed at first impracticable are in time An experiment disproving a prediction is discovery. It does not say in the Bible that all laws of nature are expressible linearly. Never underestimate the joy people derive from hearing something they already know. When asked what he meant by a miracle, "Oh, anything with a probability of less than 20%. Young man, if I could remember the names of these particles, I would have been a botanist." It is not good to try to stop knowledge from going forward. Ignorance is never better than knowledge. Experimental confirmation of a prediction is merely a measurement. An experiment disproving a prediction is a discovery. On what characteristics Nobel Prize-winning physicists had in common, I cannot think of a single one, not even intelligence. Before I came here, I was confused about this subject. Having listened to your lecture, I am still confused, but on a higher level. Whatever nature has in store for mankind, unpleasant as it may be, men must accept, for ignorance is never better than knowledge. I remember my friend Johnny von Neumann used to say, "With 4 parameters I can fit an elephant, and with 5 I can make him wiggle his trunk." There are 2 possible outcomes. If the result confirms the hypothesis, then you've made a measurement. If the result is contrary to the hypothesis, then you've made a discovery. The fundamental point in fabricating a chain reacting machine is of course to see to it that each fission produces a certain number of neutrons, and some of these neutrons will again produce fission. Where is everybody? Humans could theoretically colonize the galaxy in 1,000,000 years or so, and if they could, astronauts from older civilizations could do the same. So why haven't they come to Earth? Some people stick with the traditional, feeling struck by the epic beauty or blown away by the insane scale of the universe. Personally, I go for the old existential meltdown followed by acting weird for the next half hour. But everyone feels something. One might be led to question whether the scientists acted wisely in presenting the statesmen of the world with this appalling problem. Actually, there was no choice. Once basic knowledge is acquired, any attempt at preventing its fruition would be as futile as hopping to stop the Earth from revolving around the sun. Although the problem of transmuting chemical elements into each other is much older than a satisfactory definition of the very concept of chemical element, it is well known that the first and most important step towards its solution was made only 19 years ago by the late Lord Rutherford, who started the method of the nuclear bombardments. The fact that no limits exist to the destructiveness of this weapon, the super, i.e. the hydrogen bomb, makes its very existence, and the knowledge of its construction, a danger to humanity as a whole. It is necessarily an evil thing considered in any light. For these reasons, we believe it important for the President of the United States to tell the American public and the world what we think is wrong on fundamental ethical principles to initiate the development of such a weapon. Rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the Earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the Earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a place to stand, and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. Eureka, I have found it, on discovery of a method to test the purity of gold. Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. There are things which seem incredible to most men who have not studied mathematics. Mathematics reveals its secrets only to those who approach it with pure love, for its own beauty. How many theorems in geometry which have seemed at first impracticable are in time successfully worked out? The center of gravity of any parallelogram lies on the straight line. If there is a God, he's a great mathematician. A physical law must possess mathematical beauty. God used beautiful mathematics in creating the world. Pick a flower on Earth, and you move the farthest star. There are always more people who prefer to speak than to listen. Scientific progress is measured in units of courage, not intelligence. Paul Dirac quote, "God used beautiful mathematics in creating the world." It is more important to have beauty in one's equations than to have them fit experiment. Living is worthwhile if one can contribute in some small way to this endless chain of progress. Magic numbers. Can math's equations be beautiful? A theory with mathematical beauty is more likely to be correct than an ugly one that fits some experimental data. I consider that I understand an equation when I can predict the properties of its solutions without actually solving it. The measure of greatness in a scientific idea is the extent to which it stimulates thought and opens up new lines of research. If we are honest, and scientists have to be, we must admit that religion is a jumble of false assertions, with no basis in reality. Mathematics is the tool specially suited for dealing with abstract concepts of any kind, and there is no limit to its power in this field. As time goes on, it becomes increasingly evident that the rules which the mathematician finds interesting are the same as those which nature has chosen. One could perhaps describe the situation by saying that God is a mathematician of a very high order, and he used very advanced mathematics in constructing the universe. The aim of science is to make difficult things understandable in a simpler way. The aim of poetry is to state simple things in an incomprehensible way. The two are incompatible. A termination of one's life is necessary in the scheme of things to provide a logical reason for unselfishness. The fact that there is an end to one's life compels one to take an interest in things that will continue to live after one is dead. I should like to suggest to you that the cause of all the economic troubles is that we have an economic system which tries to maintain an equality of value between two things, which it would be better to recognize from the beginning as of unequal value. The fundamental laws necessary for the mathematical treatment of a large part of physics and the whole of chemistry are thus completely known, and the difficulty lies only in the fact that application of these laws leads to equations that are too complex to be solved. When Erwin Schrödinger went to the Solvay conferences in Brussels, he would walk from the station to the hotel where the delegates stayed, carrying all his luggage in a rucksack and looking so like a tramp that it needed a great deal of argument at the reception desk before he could claim a room. What makes the theory of relativity so acceptable to physicists, in spite of its going against the principle of simplicity, is its great mathematical beauty. This is a quality which cannot be defined, any more than beauty in art can be defined, but which people who study mathematics usually have no difficulty in appreciating. I do not see how a man can work on the frontiers of physics and write poetry at the same time. They are in opposition. In science, you want to say something that nobody knew before, in words which everyone can understand. In poetry, you are bound to say something that everyone knows already in words that nobody can understand. I found the best ideas usually came, not when one was actively striving for them, but when one was in a more relaxed state. I used to take long solitary walks on Sundays, during which I tended to review the current situation in a leisurely way. Such occasions often proved fruitful, even though, or perhaps because, the primary purpose of the walk was relaxation and not research. If you are receptive and humble, mathematics will lead you by the hand. Again and again, when I have been at a loss how to proceed, I have just had to wait until I have felt the mathematics led me by the hand. It has led me along an unexpected path, a path where new vistas open up, a path leading to new territory, where one can set up a base of operations, from which one can survey the surroundings and plan future progress. The physicist, in his study of natural phenomena, has two methods of making progress. 1. The method of experiment and observation, and 2. The method of mathematical reasoning. The former is just the collection of selected data. The latter enables one to infer results about experiments that have not been performed. There is no logical reason why the second method should be possible at all, but one has found in practice that it does work and meets with reasonable success. Rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a place to stand, and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. Eureka, I have found it, on discovery of a method to test the purity of gold. Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. There are things which seem incredible to most men who have not studied mathematics. Mathematics reveals its secrets only to those who approach it with pure love, for its own beauty. How many theorems in geometry which have seemed at all things happen by virtue of necessity. Many much-learned men have no intelligence. The man enslaved to wealth can never be honest. Sexual intercourse is a slight attack of apoplexy. The sweetest things become the most bitter by excess. We know nothing in reality, for truth lies in an abyss. Our sins are more easily remembered than our good deeds. Men will cease to be fools only when they cease to be men. Some men are masters of cities, but are enslaved to women. It is better to destroy one's own errors than those of others. It is greed to do all the talking, but not to want to listen at all. Nothing exists except atoms and empty space. Everything else is opinion. My enemy is not the man who wrongs me, but the man who means to wrong me. It is hard to fight desire, but to control it is the sign of a reasonable man. Throw moderation to the winds, and the greatest pleasures bring the greatest pains. Happiness resides not in possessions, and not in gold. Happiness dwells in the soul. The pride of youth is in strength and beauty. The pride of old age is in discretion. The wise man belongs to all countries, for the home of a great soul is the whole world. The brave man is not only he who overcomes the enemy, but he who is stronger than pleasures. Happiness resides not in possessions, and not in gold. Happiness dwells in the soul. The first principles of the universe are atoms and empty space. Everything else is merely thought to exist. Men find happiness neither by means of the body nor through possessions, but through uprightness and wisdom. If your desires are not great, a little will seem much to you, for small appetite makes poverty equivalent to wealth. Everywhere man blames nature and fate, yet his fate is mostly but the echo of his character and passion, his mistakes and his weaknesses. People sometimes rationalize their greed by saying that it is all for the good of their children, but this is nothing but an excuse they use to make their despicable actions appear respectable and praiseworthy. Rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a place to stand, and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. Eureka, I have found it, on discovery of a method to test the purity of gold. Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. There are things which seem incredible to most men who have not studied mathematics. Mathematics reveals its secrets only to those who approach it with pure love, for its own beauty. How many theorems in geometry which have seemed at first impracticable. The world is my country, science is my religion. I believe that we do not know anything for certain, but everything probably. The taste of music with the inhabitants of Venus and Jupiter is at a high level, similar to that of Frenchmen or Italians. I esteem his understanding and subtlety highly, but I consider that they have been put to ill use in the greater part of his work, where the author studies things of little use. What a wonderful and amazing scheme have we here of the magnificent vastness of the universe. So many suns, so many earths, and every one of them stocked with so many herbs, trees, and animals, and adorned with so many seas and mountains. And how must our wonder and admiration be increased when we consider the prodigious distance and multitude of the stars? How vast those orbs must be, and how inconsiderable this earth, the theater upon which all our mighty designs, all our navigations, and all our wars are transacted, is when compared to them. A very fit consideration and matter of reflection for those kings and princes who sacrifice the lives of so many people, only to flatter their ambition in being masters of some pitiful corner of this small spot. We may mount from this dull earth, and viewing it from on high, consider whether nature has laid out all her cost and finery upon this small speck of dirt. So, like travelers into other distant countries, we shall be better able to judge of what's done at home, know how to make a true estimate of, and set its own value upon everything. We shall be less apt to admire what this world calls great, shall nobly despise those trifles the generality of men set their affections on, when we know that there are a multitude of such earths inhabited and adorned as well as our own. A man that is of Copernicus' opinion, that this earth of ours is a planet, carried round and enlightened by the sun, like the rest of them, cannot but sometimes have a fancy, that the rest of the planets have their dress and furniture, nay, and their inhabitants too, as well as this earth of ours. But we were always apt to conclude that 'twas in vain to inquire after what nature had been pleased to do there, seeing there was no likelihood of ever coming to an end of the inquiry. But a while ago, thinking somewhat seriously on this matter, not that I count myself quicker-sighted than those great men of the past, but that I had the happiness to live after most of them, methoughts the inquiry was not so impracticable, nor the way so stopped up with difficulties, but that there was very good room left for probable conjectures. Rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, Eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a place to stand, and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. Eureka, I have found it, on discovery of a method to test the purity of gold. Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. There are things which seem incredible to most men who have not studied mathematics. Mathematics reveals its secrets only to those who approach it with pure love, for its own beauty. How many theorems in geometry which have seemed nothing is more practical than a good theory. The life contest is primarily a competition for available energy. In my view, all salvation for philosophy may be expected to come from Darwin's theory. Bring forward what is true, write it so that it is clear, defend it to your last breath. Thermodynamics, correctly interpreted, does not just allow Darwinian evolution, it favors it. Available energy is the main object at stake in the struggle for existence and the evolution of the world. Which is more remarkable fact about America, that millionaires are idealists or idealists become millionaires. Philosophy gets on my nerves. If we analyze the ultimate ground of everything, then everything finally falls into nothingness. But I have decided to resume my lectures again and look the hydra of doubt straight into the eye, and it be quite ominous if one values one's life. Since a given system can never of its own accord go over into another equally probable state, but into a more probable one, it is likewise impossible to construct a system of bodies that after traversing various states returns periodically to its original state. That is a perpetual motion machine. To go straight to the deepest depth, I went for Hegel. What unclear, thoughtless flow of words I was to find there. My unlucky star led me from Hegel to Schopenhauer. Even in Kant there were many things that I could grasp so little that, given his general acuity of mind, I almost suspected that he was pulling the reader's leg or was even an impostor. The most ordinary things are to philosophy a source of insoluble puzzles. With infinite ingenuity it constructs a concept of space or time, and then finds it absolutely impossible that there be objects in this space, or that processes occur during this time. The source of this kind of logic lies in excessive confidence in the so-called laws of thought. The general struggle for existence of animate beings is not a struggle for raw materials. These for organisms are air, water, and soil, all abundantly available, nor for energy which exists in plenty in the sun and any hot body in the form of heat, but rather a struggle for entropy, which becomes available through the transition of energy from the hot sun to the cold earth. It must be splendid to command millions of people in great national ventures, to lead 100,000 to victory in battle. But it seems to me greater still to discover fundamental truths in a very modest room with very modest means. Truths that will still be foundations of human knowledge, when the memory of these battles is painstakingly preserved only in the archives of the historian. Who is not familiar with Maxwell's memoirs on his dynamical theory of gases? From one side enter the equations of state, from the other side the equations of motion in a central field. Ever higher soars the chaos of formulae. Suddenly we hear, as from kettle drums, the 4 beats put in equals 5. The evil spirit V vanishes, and that which had seemed insuperable has been overcome as if by a stroke of magic. One result after another follows in quick succession till at last we arrive at the conditions for thermal equilibrium together with expressions for the transport coefficients. Rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. All children are born atheists. They have no idea of God. The source of man's unhappiness is his ignorance of nature. The unhappiness of people is due to their ignorance of nature. All religions are ancient monuments to superstition, ignorance, and ferocity. Tolerance and freedom of thought are the veritable antidotes to religious fanaticism. If the ignorance of nature gave birth to gods, the knowledge of nature is calculated to destroy them. It is only by dispelling the clouds and phantoms of religion that we shall discover truth, reason, and morality. It is thus superstition infatuates man from his infancy, fills him with vanity, and enslaves him with fanaticism. The atheist destroys the chimeras which afflict the human race, and so leads men back to nature, to experience, and to reason. All religious notions are uniformly founded on authority. All the religions of the world forbid examination, and are not disposed that men should reason upon them. Nature, you say, is totally inexplicable without a God. That is to say, to explain what you understand very little, you have need of a cause which you understand not at all. Savage and furious nations, perpetually at war, adore under diverse names some god conformable to their ideas, that is to say, cruel, carnivorous, selfish, bloodthirsty. The universe, that vast assemblage of everything that exists, presents only matter and motion. The whole offers to our contemplation nothing but an immense, an uninterrupted succession of causes and effects. When we examine the opinions of men, we find that nothing is more uncommon than common sense. Or, in other words, they lack judgment to discover plain truths, or to reject absurdities and palpable contradictions. If the ministers of the Church have often permitted nations to revolt for heaven's cause, they never allowed them to revolt against real evils or known violences. It is from heaven that the chains have come to fetter the minds of mortals. If we go back to the beginnings of things, we shall always find that ignorance and fear created the gods, that imagination, rapture, and deception embellished them, that weakness worships them, that custom spares them, and that tyranny favors them in order to profit from the blindness of men. Men always fool themselves when they give up experience for systems born of the imagination. Man is the work of nature, he exists in nature, he is subject to its laws, he cannot break free, he cannot leave even in thought. It is in vain that his spirit wants to soar beyond the bounds of the visible world, he is always forced to return. Suns are extinguished or become corrupted, planets perish and scatter across the wastes of the sky. Other suns are kindled, new planets form to make their revolutions or describe new orbits, and man, an infinitely minute part of a globe which itself is only an imperceptible point in the immense whole, believes that the universe is made for himself. What indeed is an atheist? He is one who destroys delusions which are harmful to humanity in order to lead men back to nature, to reality, to reason. He is a thinker who, having reflected on the nature of matter, its energy, properties, and ways of acting, has no need of idealized powers or imaginary intelligences to explain the phenomena of the universe and the operations of nature. It is thus religion infatuates man from his infancy, fills him with vanity and fanaticism. If he has a heated imagination, it drives him on to fury. If he has activity, it makes him a madman, who is frequently as cruel to himself, as he is dangerous and incommodious to others. If, on the contrary, he be phlegmatic or of a slothful habit, he becomes melancholy and is useless to society. Religion has ever filled the mind of man with darkness, and kept him in ignorance of his real duties and true interests. It is by dispelling the clouds and phantoms of religion that we shall discover truth, morality, and reason. Religion diverts us from the causes of evils, and from these remedies which nature advocates, far from curing. It only aggravates, perpetuates, and multiplies them. People have suffered and become insane for centuries by the thought of eternal punishment after death. Wouldn't it be better to depend on blind matter than a God who puts out traps for people, invites them to sin, and allows them to sin and commit crimes he could prevent, only to finally get the barbarian pleasure to punish them in an excessive way, of no use for himself, without them changing their ways, and without their example preventing others from committing crimes? The inward persuasion that we are free to do or not to do a thing is but a mere illusion. If we trace the true principle of our actions, we shall find that they are always necessary consequences of our volitions and desires, which are never in our power. You think yourself free because you do what you will, but are you free to will or not to will, to desire or not to desire? Are not your volitions and desires necessarily excited by objects or qualities totally independent of you? The Jehovah of the Jews is a suspicious tyrant, who breathes nothing but blood, murder, and carnage, and who demands that they should nourish him with the vapors of animals. The Jupiter of the pagans is a lascivious monster. The Moloch of the Phoenicians is a cannibal. The pure mind of the Christians resolved, in order to appease his fury, to crucify his own son. The savage god of the Mexicans cannot be satisfied without thousands of mortals which are immolated to his sanguinary appetite. How could the human mind progress, while tormented with frightful phantoms and guided by men, interested in perpetuating its ignorance and fears? Man has been forced to vegetate in his primitive stupidity. He has been taught stories about invisible powers upon whom his happiness was supposed to depend. Occupied solely by his fears, and by unintelligible reveries, he has always been at the mercy of priests, who have reserved to themselves the right of thinking for him, and of directing his actions. Rise above oneself and grasp the world. Eureka, Eureka, I found it, I found it. The perimeter of the earth is about 3 million stadia, and not greater. Give me but a firm spot on which to stand, and I shall move the earth. The center of gravity of any cylinder is the point of bisection of the axis. Give me a place to stand, and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. Eureka, I have found it, on discovery of a method to test the purity of gold. Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. There are things which seem incredible to most men who have not studied mathematics. Mathematics reveals its secrets only to those who approach it with pure love, for its own beauty. How many theorems in geometry which have seemed at first impracticable are in time successfully worked out? The center of gravity of any parallelogram lies on the straight line, joining the middle points of opposite sides. Two magnitudes, whether commensurate, you see but you do not observe. Any truth is better than indefinite doubt. There is nothing more deceptive than an obvious fact. The love of books is among the choicest gifts of the gods. Healthy skepticism is the basis of all accurate observation. You yourself may not be luminous, but you are a conductor of light. I'm not a psychopath, I'm a fully functioning sociopath. Do your research. The world is full of obvious things which nobody, by any chance, ever observes. Life is infinitely stranger than anything which the mind of man could invent. There are 50 who can reason synthetically, for one who can reason analytically. Mediocrity knows nothing higher than itself, but talent instantly recognizes genius. The chief proof of man's real greatness lies in his perception of his own smallness. Education never ends, Watson. It is a series of lessons, with the greatest for the last. It has long been an axiom of mine that the little things are infinitely the most important. Skill is fine, and genius is splendid, but the right contacts are more valuable than either. It is stupidity, rather than courage, to refuse to recognize danger when it is close upon you. When you have eliminated the impossible, what is left, no matter how unlikely, is the truth. When the impossible has been eliminated, all that remains, no matter how improbable, is possible. It is a fool's plan to teach a man to be a cur in peace, and think that he will be a lion in war. It is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. Insensibly, one begins to twist facts to suit theories, instead of theories to suit facts. How sweet the morning air is! How small we feel with our petty ambitions and strivings in the presence of the great elemental forces of nature. The most dangerous condition for a man or a nation is when his intellectual side is more developed than his spiritual. Is that not exactly the condition of the world today? A dog reflects the family life. Whoever saw a frisky dog in a gloomy family, or a sad dog in a happy one? Snarling people have snarling dogs, dangerous people have dangerous ones. Depend upon it, there comes a time when for every addition of knowledge you forget something that you knew before. It is of the highest importance, therefore, not to have useless facts elbowing out the useful ones. When the spirits are low, when the day appears dark, when work becomes monotonous, when hope hardly seems worth having, just mount a bicycle and go out for a spin down the road, without thought on anything but the ride you are taking.